And in more discussion on the aftermath of Charlie Kirk's death, a debate on censorship has emerged after late night host Jimmy Kimmel was suspended by ABC following controversial comments that he made. Joining us now for a discussion on the topic of censorship is NTD News contributor Mike Leon, who's host of the podcast Can We Please Talk? Also with us, Jeffrey Tucker, founder and president of the Brownstone Institute and author of Life After Lockdown. Gentlemen, thank you both for joining us. Mike, let me give the burden of summary to you since you do it so well, specifically as to what Kimmel's comments were and if you view his suspension by ABC as either censorship or a form of government overreach.
Great question, Kerry. Good morning to everybody. Okay, let's start with the high-level premise and background. I have 15 years, Mike Leon, working in television programming for HBO, for Warner Media, and for ESPN, a company that's owned by Disney, adjacent to ABC. So I have a little bit of background and knowledge and experience in this, right? Bunch of things can be true at the same time, Kerry. The first thing is comedy is subjective. What I think is funny, what Jeff thinks is funny, what Kerry thinks is funny may be three different tracks, right? So that's the first thing. Comedy is subjective. His comments are subjective. And they're subjective because none of us work at ABC. None of us are in charge of programming. None of us are in those decision-making rooms, right? So we don't know if that comment teetered the line to somebody there to say, okay, it's time to remove this show. That's number one. Number two, Jimmy Kimmel's show had brought in $70 million of ad revenue, according to Fox Business recently. It has 21 million subscribers on YouTube, which is a new monetization path for a lot of networks now, utilizing the digital audience in space. So linear, traditional ratings doesn't really matter anymore in the grand scheme of things. So both of those things can be true at the same time. The third thing that's true at the same time, he's not being canceled, by the way. I agree with Jeffrey's overarching premise in his article. He's not being canceled. But the biggest thing is that there is a sort of through line right here that a lot of people are not touching on, is that Nexstar, which owns a lot of the affiliates that airs Jimmy Kimmel Live across their stations nationwide, is set to acquire Tegna, which is another big affiliate station owning company. And this happened back in mid-August, and now it needs FCC approval. Well, the FCC chair was recently on a bunch of podcasts like Benny Johnson's and Scott Jennings' radio show in Kentucky, talking about some of these companies potentially losing their license if they don't start to play hardball. So everyone's starting to make the through line that there could be potentially something nefarious. I don't agree with it, but that there could be something nefarious from the administration to say that Jimmy Kimmel should be canceled. So the conversation about whether he's being censored or not dances around those lines. I don't believe that. I believe comedy is subjective. I believe that there were some things internally that could have led to this. But I also think that you can't have this glaring omission of the fact that they need the FCC's approval to go through with this merger, and that there could be something underlying there at play.
Thanks for that summary. And Jeffrey, you penned an article in the Epoch Times on this very topic. Your perspective?
Yeah, I don't really see it as censorship, although I admit that the timing and trajectory of all the events is a little bit complicated. You see these Brendan Carr's comments from the SEC coming down at the same time. Many affiliates were expressing sadness and regret, getting tons of phone calls. Apparently, many of the stations that had run him had been under pressure in any way for him to clean up his act. Carr's own comments really extend out from a very specific FCC regulation. In fact, it's the top line item in FCC's role as a sort of guardian of network television. By network, I mean, the top networks with the top bandwidth, which is given away for free, in exchange for which you have to perform some sort of public service. But one of the rules is that you don't inflame people with information about a major crime that is contrary to the facts and unnecessarily. Okay, so that's really at the top of the line there, and that has been adhered to for decades, and everybody knows that rule. Honestly, when I think about Kimmel's little comedy sketch there, sometimes I think what happened here is that you had a sort of a downplaying of the significance of the event by late night comedians. They didn't really get why this is such a big deal. I mean, even in the immediate aftermath of the murder, you saw a lot of things on network television about, well, he some version of he got what was coming to him. You played this game, you're going to pay the price. That seemed to be the sort of general attitude that we saw expressed. And Kimmel's comment was a little too light, a little too dismissive, and then he made this offhand remark that the killer was himself MAGA adjacent. And for Carr, that was too much. And so Carr's comments, which were very, I would say, incendiary and unusual for sure, came at the same time you had this sort of populist revolt boiling from underneath, and a lot of pressure to get this guy out, that he just wasn't working for audiences anymore. I've watched a lot of late night television for many years, and I'm always amazed at how they can just presume that their entire audience is on one side of the political spectrum with very little willingness to defer to the legitimacy of any other perspective. So I see this as a long time coming, and not really a case of censorship, but just sort of, this is what happens when you make light of such a serious thing as Charlie Kirk's murder.
This episode of Can We Please Talk is presented by our friends over at Fresh Roasted Coffee. Delicious tasting coffee since 2009. They've been our proud sponsor. You see the promo code there. Look at this. They sent me this beautiful kit right here. Listen to that. Listen to that seal coming out, right? What's in it? Environmentally safe, compostable K-Pods. I love the dark Mexican blend. You can go to their website right now, take the quiz. That quiz is going to put you with a flavor profile. Listen to that sound of the coffee that you're going to be matched up with. Go to freshroastedcoffee.com. Click the link right now in our show notes. You can see it right there. Click that link. It's going to take you to the site. When you get to checkout, use our promo code, Can We Please Get 20? All one word, Can We Please Get 20, 20. You're going to get 20% off your first purchase. Head to freshroastedcoffee.com, our official sponsor of the Can We Please Talk podcast.
Yeah, and as Jeffrey points out, Mike, the tastefulness of the comment and the timing and appropriateness, debatable. Your comment that comedy certainly is subjective, but as Jeffrey points out, anything that goes over the airwaves now kind of has a higher bar, because there is a burden that it can't be contrary to fact when related to a crime. Does that bring any additional nuance to your comment that comedy is subjective in this instance?
Yeah, well, there's a couple things. So let me point out something, because I had written it down here from Jeffrey's article. The FCC prohibits broadcasting false information about a crime or a catastrophe if the broadcaster knows the information is false and will cause substantial public harm if aired. The issue with that is that we have numerous instances, and this is not a left or right thing, numerous instances of my former employer at Fox, numerous instances of CNN, whether it be some military operations and things like that have issued retractions, that have done certain things that dance that line of causing misinformation to spread, whether it be Dominion voting systems or whether it be something else. None of those broadcasters have lost their licenses. Now, we could argue that Jimmy Kimmel's joke, right? Again, the premise of the joke, the punchline of the joke was that Trump has moved on to the next stage of grief, which is construction. That's funny, but it's funny subjectively to the three of us in different ways. Now, the first part of what he said about the killer and his adjacency and his political leanings, that does teeter the line. When we worked at HBO, for example, Carrie, if somebody is killed, let's say an actor dies or something like that, we have everything ready, from obituary packages to in memoriams to content that's ready to usurp, right? When something like this happens, for comedians that are planning out their late night monologues, there needs to be some internal team meeting. There always is, pre-production meetings. And then they sit there and they go, what do we say about this? Because we're damned if we do, we're damned if we don't. People come on 11:35, they want to hear the monologue. If he doesn't touch on it, he could potentially lose some audience members, let's be honest. If the network had put an edict out saying, let's stay away from this and just make a blanket statement and say, no one touch this. This is too hot right now. Let's let this cool down and let's let cooler heads prevail. That could have happened as well. But I do agree, overarching premise. Look, Trump doesn't like any of the late night hosts. Seth Meyers, because of what happened at the White House Correspondents' Dinner back in 2013, he doesn't like any of these late night hosts. He's made no bones about it. If he wanted Jimmy Kimmel removed, it would have happened in February, March, April, May, June, July, when all of these monologues that he had would make fun of him. But again, in terms of connecting the dots, if we were all sitting at home, you don't know anything about television, and you want to be an investigator in all of this, is Jimmy Kimmel being censored? No, because he can start his own YouTube channel tomorrow. He's already a popular figure. He makes millions of dollars. He's not being censored. However, the company that he works for is under acquisition, or at least his content from a distribution standpoint is under acquisition from somebody else. They need help from the FCC to do that. So there is a through line, and I think people need to understand that overarching premise to have all of the information about this case as it pertains to Jimmy Kimmel being suspended. And by the way, we still don't know if he may come back. His folks have met with the Nexstar team. They're at an impasse right now in terms of whether or not they want him back. So we'll see if it all shakes out. This could end up being nothing, and he's just removed at least until the true fall lineup starts, and he could come back in October. We still don't know that.
You make a lot of interesting points. Certainly with the Skydance acquisition of Paramount, another one that was under scrutiny from the FCC, but also you mentioned CNN and HBO, who are not burdened by the same level that somebody that uses the public airwaves, like your other example of Fox and Dominion. So some of it's getting into nuance and minutia that probably the broader public cares less about than the points that you made, Mike. And pivoting back to the conversation around censorship, going back to Jeffrey, you in your article make a distinction between the comments that FCC Chair Carr made and that Attorney General Pam Bondi made, who then needed to later clarify the intent of her comments, which are really around censorship. Maybe you could explore that, Jeffrey.
Bondi I don't understand. She just wildly misspoke, just out of nowhere, said, well, there's free speech and there's hate speech. Okay, this is something that Republicans and conservatives have been raging against for, 20 years or something. She somehow didn't get the memo. And she's going out there saying, we don't allow hate speech in America. I don't know where that comes from. It was a wild misstatement. She clarified it right away. And speaking of clarifications and misstatements, one interesting wrinkle here to the Kimmel story, the idea that it was news. He has a deadline. He has to do a late night show. He treated the murder too lightly, used as a matter of comedy. It offended a lot of people. The network went to Kimmel and said, well, don't you want to issue an apology and a clarification on your comments? And he flat out said, no, here's what I prepared for tonight. And he was planning to double down. That was actually the thing that flipped the switch. And when they realized that Kimmel was not going to at least give a nod to the seriousness of the occasion and say some point of regret for his comments. Instead, his monologue that he himself had personally prepared, went even further and doubled down. And that's when the network said, okay, this is a disaster. I mean, mergers or not, or FCC or not, I mean, you just can't. Again, I just go back to this point. I think that there's a class of media elites that completely, it's hard to decide. I think it's very difficult for anybody to disagree with this. They misread the room after this murder. They did not understand it. I remember the first headline from the New York Times was Charlie Kirk, right-wing agitator, dies. Okay, that's how they rendered it. And Kimmel did the same thing. There was a sense of like, let's not take this seriously. Now, 24 hours later, the New York Times had a headline that said, "Nation mourns Charlie Kirk." Okay, so they corrected. They realized, all right, these are not my people. These are not my friends. It's not my social set. Nobody I know likes Charlie Kirk, but still, we've got a big movement out there, and this is a great national tragedy. So they tried to capture it. Kimmel was unwilling to do what the New York Times did, which was just to eat its words, change his tone, and somehow reflect the national mood. All these people underestimated, and what we saw at that funeral yesterday was, people who were there said they've never been a part of anything like that. And I wasn't there, but just watching online, it was an unbelievable display of, I would call it like cultural power. not even political power, but cultural power. I mean, the sadness, the emotion, the expressions of grief of more than 100,000 people gathered in that stadium, including all the, Elon Musk and President Trump and, the entire cabinet. It was so powerful and so moving. A moment like this is really impactful for a nation and for a culture. And I think what you had in the aftermath of the assassination immediately was just a media elite that did not understand the moment. They misread the room. They didn't get it. They mischaracterized it. And now they're paying the price.
Hey, everybody, Mike Leon from the Can We Please Talk podcast. Thank you so much for watching this clip. Do me a favor, hit subscribe. Gonna get more content from us over at Can We Please Talk.